If every store around you closed tomorrow for 1 week, which item do you think most people would regret not buying ahead of time? It is not always fresh meat, milk, or eggs. Sometimes it is a canned food that costs only a few dollars, sitting right in front of you every time you walk through the supermarket, yet you still pass by it as if it does not matter. Today, we are ranking 9 canned foods, from should already be in your pantry, to you will truly regret not having them when a crisis happens. Some items on this list may surprise you. Some are so small that most people overlook them. Some do not look impressive on the shelf, but become incredibly useful during a power outage, when stores close, or when you are simply too exhausted to cook. And the item in the number 1 spot is not just emergency food storage. It is almost a complete dinner inside a single can. Let's start with number 9. 9. Canned beets. If you walk past the canned food aisle at the supermarket, there is a very good chance you will pass by beets without looking twice. No one walks into the store with a sense of urgency just to find a few cans of beets. They do not stand out like canned meat. They are not as familiar as canned soup, and they do not create the same survival feeling as rice, beans, or noodles. But in an emergency food pantry, the biggest problem is sometimes not a lack of calories. It is a lack of balance. In the first few days, the refrigerator still has fresh vegetables. You still have salad, carrots, leafy greens, or a few things you bought the week before. But after only a few days without power, delayed grocery trips, or difficult access to stores, most fresh food starts losing quality very quickly. And that is when many families look back at their emergency shelf. They have rice, they have noodles, they have canned fish, they have canned meat, they have crackers, but almost no real vegetables left. That is the moment an ordinary can of beets starts to become unusual. A 15-ounce can of beets usually costs around $1 to $2 at many American supermarkets, but it provides about 3 to 4 ready-to-eat servings of vegetables. In other words, for the price of just a bottle of soda or a small bag of snacks, you are buying a portion of vegetables that can sit quietly on the shelf for years, with no refrigerator, no washing, no cutting, and no need to turn on the stove. That detail matters a lot. Because in a crisis, what wears people down is not only hunger, it is having to think too much about every single meal. Beets solve part of that pressure. You open the can, eat them directly, add them to a plate of rice, serve them with sardines, canned chicken, crackers, or mix them quickly with a little vinegar, salt, and pepper. Nothing fancy, but enough to make a meal feel less dry, less heavy, and less like emergency food. Nutritionally, beets provide fiber, folate, potassium, and many micronutrients that food pantries built too heavily around starches often lack. For people over 50, this becomes even more worth noticing. When the body is tired, when appetite drops, when standing in the kitchen for too long becomes uncomfortable, soft foods that are easy to chew, easy to swallow, and do not need cooking become far more valuable than their appearance suggests. But the real strength of beets is not only found on the nutrition label. It is found in the feeling that the meal is still decent. A bowl of rice with canned fish can fill you up, but add a serving of beets on the side, and that meal instantly has more color, more softness, is easier to eat, and feels less repetitive. After many days of eating mostly dry, salty, or starchy foods, just one serving of soft vegetables can make the body feel more cared for. That is something many people do not account for when preparing. They prepare to survive, but forget to prepare to keep eating day after day without getting bored, without getting tired of the food, and without feeling like every meal is the same. For storage, most canned beets can keep good quality for about 2 to 5 years, if kept in a dry, cool place, away from direct sunlight and away from hot, humid areas like a garage in summer. Before using them, always check the can. If the can is swollen, leaking, badly rusted, or deeply dented along the seam, do not try to save it. Beets are not the most exciting item to put in your cart, but in a situation where fresh vegetables have disappeared, power is unstable, cooking is limited, and every meal starts to repeat. A can of beets costing less than $2 may be the only vegetable left on the dinner table. At that point, it is no longer something to overlook. It is the gap you managed to fill before it was too late. 8. Canned pineapple. Something interesting happens in most crises. People often do not run out of calories first. They run out of a sense of normalcy. In the first few days, everything is still fine. You still have rice, noodles, and canned food in the pantry. But after many days of eating the same foods, your taste buds begin to get tired. Meals become monotonous. The whole family eats less, not because there is no food, but because they are simply too sick of it. That is when a can of pineapple can make a much bigger difference than it appears to. A 20-ounce can of pineapple often costs around $1.50 to $3 at many American supermarkets. But it can provide about 4 to 5 servings of sweet, soft, ready-to-eat fruit. On a normal day, that may not seem special. But imagine the 5th day after a long power outage. The bananas have become overripe and then disappeared. The last apples were eaten days ago. The refrigerator no longer provides fresh fruit. That is when a simple can of pineapple can bring back something many people do not realize they are missing: freshness. Pineapple brings natural sweetness, a light tartness, and a bright flavor that very few other storage foods can provide. It contains vitamin C, a certain amount of fiber, and especially the ability to break the repetition of meals built too heavily around starch, salt, and heavy-tasting canned foods. Emergency food is not only something that helps you survive, it is something that helps you still want to eat. A pantry that is full but makes the whole family tired of eating after 1 week is not a perfect system. Pineapple also has an advantage that many other canned fruits do not have. It cuts through salty flavors very well. When a meal has too much canned meat, canned fish, instant noodles, or high-sodium food, a few pieces of pineapple can soften the palate. It is not just dessert. It is a way to make a heavy-tasting meal feel more pleasant. A can of pineapple can be eaten directly from the can, mixed with oats, eaten with yogurt, used as a simple dessert, or combined with canned chicken and rice to create a sweet and sour meal that is easier to eat. Even the pineapple juice in the can can be used if it is pineapple packed in juice. You can add a little to oats, smoothies, or dilute it to create a light flavor on hot days. But if the can uses syrup that is too sweet, treat it as flavoring, not a main drink. When buying, if possible, prioritize pineapple canned in 100% juice instead of heavy syrup. This type is usually easier to use, less sharply sweet, and works better when combined with oats, yogurt, rice, or canned meat. A common mistake is buying a few cans and then forgetting them for years. Canned pineapple usually keeps good quality for about 1 to 2 years, sometimes longer depending on the manufacturer and storage conditions. Because pineapple is naturally acidic, store it in a dry, cool place, away from prolonged high temperatures. After opening the can, if you do not finish it, transfer the rest to a clean container with a lid and refrigerate it if power is still available. The greatest value of canned pineapple is not in vitamin C or shelf life. It is psychological. During stressful times, when meals start to repeat and people are no longer interested in what they already have, the familiar sweet and sour taste of a can of fruit can make the whole day feel a little lighter. A can of pineapple will not solve the entire crisis, but it can solve a much quieter problem: the food fatigue that makes people no longer want to eat. And in a prolonged situation, that is a much bigger problem than many people realize. But if pineapple helps maintain morale and comfort at mealtime, the next item brings a completely different kind of value: the ability to turn the simplest foods into meals that are softer, easier to eat, and far more nutritious than many people think. 7. Pure canned pumpkin. Many people see canned pumpkin and immediately think of fall pies. That is exactly why this may be one of the most underrated items on the entire list. A can of pure pumpkin is not just a baking ingredient. It is something that helps turn dry, simple, and boring foods into meals that are much softer, more moist, and much easier to eat. Imagine the fourth day after a major storm. You still have rice, oats, noodles, crackers, and a few cans of meat. In theory, you still have food. But after many similar meals, everything starts to feel dry, heavy, and hard to swallow. Especially for older adults, when the body is tired, the throat feels dry, and appetite drops. A meal that is too hard or too dry can make them eat less, even though there is still plenty of food in the pantry. That is when a can of pure pumpkin begins to show its real value. A 15-ounce can usually costs around $1.50 to $3 at many American supermarkets, but it can create about 3 to 4 softer, thicker, and more nutritious servings. You can mix pumpkin into oats to make breakfast less dry, add it to broth to make a simple soup, or mix it with noodles, seasoning, or a little canned chicken to give the meal more moisture and a fuller feeling. What makes pure pumpkin different from many other storage foods is that it does not try to be the main dish. It works more like cooking oil, broth, or seasoning. It helps other foods become better. A little pumpkin in porridge can make breakfast softer. A little pumpkin in soup can make dinner richer. And sometimes, those small changes are what decide whether people keep eating enough or not. Pumpkin provides a lot of vitamin A, fiber, and some important minerals. But its greatest strength is not only on the nutrition label. Canned pumpkin adds softness, thickness, and moisture to a food pantry that is often too dry, too salty, or too repetitive. It is not the star of the meal. It is what helps separate ingredients come together and become easier to eat. Pumpkin also has one very valuable point. It makes a meal feel fuller without feeling too heavy in the stomach. When mixed into porridge, soup, or oats, it creates a natural thickness, making the meal feel like there is more of it, and making it warmer, without needing to add much meat or oil. Avoid accidentally buying pumpkin pie mix instead of pure pumpkin. Read the label carefully. You need pure pumpkin, or 100% pumpkin, not pumpkin pie filling with added sugar, spices, and unnecessary ingredients. A can of pumpkin does not make a meal luxurious, but when fresh food is slowly running low, when meals start to feel the same every day, and when someone in the house needs something softer so they still want to eat, that ordinary can of pumpkin can quietly save the entire meal. It does not draw attention on the shelf, but in the right situation, it does something many more expensive foods cannot do. It makes storage food easier to eat day after day. 6. Canned clams. Some canned foods do not win by size, but by what the body can easily lack when a crisis lasts too long. Canned clams come in a small can, but they bring B12, iron, minerals, protein, and a taste of the sea that rice, noodles, or crackers cannot provide. A small can of clams is usually only about 5 ounces, often priced around $2 to $4 at many American supermarkets. But it can provide a very high amount of vitamin B12, along with iron, protein, and many important minerals. This is the number that surprises many people. Just one serving of clams can provide far more B12 than an adult needs in a day. For people over 50, this becomes even more worth noting, because the ability to absorb B12 can gradually decline with age. A can of clams does not look like survival food. It is not as large as a bag of rice. It is not as familiar as tuna. It does not create an immediate feeling of fullness like beef stew, but its value is in nutrient density. Inside one small can, you have protein, minerals, ocean flavor, and the ability to upgrade many simple meals. What makes canned clams special is that they do not need to stand alone. A little dry pasta, some cooking oil, garlic powder, pepper, a few drops of lemon juice if available, then add the clams, and you already have a dinner that feels completely different from a bland bowl of noodles. A can of clams can go into soup, porridge, rice, pasta, potatoes, or broth to create a richer flavor. Even the liquid in the can can be used to boost the flavor of soup or sauce, as long as the product is still safe and smells and tastes normal. Here is the important lesson. The most valuable foods are not always the ones you eat the most. Sometimes they are the ones that help upgrade what you already have. Canned clams turn a dry meal into a meal with more depth. They turn a simple pot of soup into something with protein, minerals, and real flavor. But this item also requires some caution. The biggest mistake is buying dozens of cans of clams just because you heard they are nutritious, when your family has never eaten them before. Clams have their own distinct smell and taste. Not everyone likes them right away. Buy 1 or 2 cans first. Try them with noodles, soup, or rice. If your family can eat them, then you can add more to your emergency pantry. Another point is sodium. Many types of canned clams can be quite salty, so anyone managing blood pressure or salt intake should read the label carefully and choose a more suitable option if possible. The smartest way to use clams is not always to eat the whole can as a main dish. Sometimes, just a small portion of clams and clam juice is enough to make a pot of soup, porridge, or noodles taste deeper. Think of it as a nutritious ocean seasoning that gives food depth without needing much. After opening the can, if you do not use it all, transfer the rest to a clean container with a lid and refrigerate it if power is still available. Do not leave leftovers in an opened can for too long. Canned clams may not be the most eye-catching item on the shelf, but when you need more nutrition without taking up much storage space, they are one of the options worth considering. One small can does not replace an entire pantry, but in the right meal, it can completely change how that meal feels. And if clams provide minerals, B12, and depth of flavor, the next item brings something many families need during a crisis: good fat, strong protein, and high nutritional value at a reasonable cost. 5. Canned mackerel. If 2 cans of food cost the same, but one gives you more protein, more good fat, and helps you stay full longer, which can would you choose? That is why canned mackerel deserves a place on this list. For many years, tuna has been more familiar, salmon has sounded more premium, and mackerel has often sat quietly on the shelf. But in terms of nutritional value per dollar, mackerel is a very noteworthy choice. A 15-ounce can of mackerel usually costs around $2 to $4 at many American supermarkets, depending on the brand and packaging style. But the whole can provide about 60 to 80 grams of protein, along with omega-3s and natural fats that help meals keep you full longer. This is not just something that fills your stomach for a moment. It is a source of protein and good fat when fresh meat, eggs, or milk are no longer as easy to store as usual. Imagine a few days after a power outage. The fresh meat has been used up. The family has eaten tuna several times and is starting to get tired of it. At that point, a can of mackerel can create a clear change. It has a stronger, richer flavor and helps a plate of rice or a bowl of noodles feel more like a real meal. You can eat mackerel with rice, mix it with noodles, eat it with crackers, potatoes, canned vegetables, or add it to soup. The tomato sauce type is usually easy to eat with rice. The type packed in oil helps make meals less dry. The type packed in water has a lighter flavor and is easier to combine with seasoning. The point to be careful about is that mackerel has a stronger flavor than tuna. Do not buy too much before knowing whether your family can actually eat it. Try 1 or 2 cans first. If it fits your taste, then add it to your emergency pantry. Some types can also be quite salty, especially sauce-packed or seasoned versions. So anyone managing blood pressure should read the label carefully. For shelf life, canned mackerel usually keeps good quality for about 3 to 5 years if stored properly. The important point is to choose mackerel based on how you plan to use it. The type packed in oil makes meals richer and helps you stay full longer. The tomato sauce type is easy to eat with rice. The type packed in water has a lighter flavor but can be drier. If you store mackerel, do not buy just one type. Choose a few different styles to avoid getting tired of it after several meals. Mackerel is not just another can of fish. Its strength is the large amount of protein, natural fat, and a longer-lasting feeling of fullness than many lighter canned foods. When meals built around rice, noodles, or crackers start making the body feel hungry again too quickly, mackerel gives the meal more weight. A good food pantry does not just need to be big enough. It needs to be diverse enough for the family to still want to eat after many days in a row. Mackerel does that well by adding strong protein, good fat, and a different flavor to meals that can easily become boring. 4. Canned chicken. If you could choose only one canned meat to use with most of the foods in your kitchen, chicken would probably be one of the strongest choices. The reason is very simple. It goes with almost everything. Rice, noodles, soup, sandwiches, potatoes, vegetables, broth. Very few foods can combine that flexibly. Imagine a few days after a power outage. The refrigerator has already been cleared out. The freezer that was once full of meat has now become a source of pressure, because anything that thaws has to be cooked quickly, eaten quickly, or thrown away if it is no longer safe. Meanwhile, a can of canned chicken is still sitting quietly on the shelf, with no need for electricity, no need to thaw, and no complicated preparation. A 12.5-ounce can of chicken usually costs around $2.50 to $4 at many American supermarkets, depending on the brand. But it can provide about 40 to 60 grams of protein for the whole can. That is a very noteworthy number when you need to turn base foods like rice, noodles, soup, or potatoes into a real meal. A can of chicken can turn a simple pot of soup into a higher protein meal. It can turn a bowl of noodles into a main dish instead of just starch. It can be mixed with rice, added to porridge, made into a sandwich, mixed with mashed potatoes, eaten with canned vegetables, or used as a simple chicken salad if you still have mayonnaise, seasoning, or a little lemon juice. This is something many people often overlook. The greatest value of some foods is not in eating them by themselves. The value is in their ability to help other ingredients go further. Canned chicken does that very well. A small amount of meat can be divided across multiple servings when paired properly with rice, noodles, broth, or vegetables. Even the liquid in the can should not be poured out too quickly. If it smells normal and the product is still safe, that liquid can be added to soup, porridge, or rice to increase moisture and flavor. For older adults, chicken is also often easier to eat than many other canned meats. Its familiar flavor, soft texture, and flexible use help reduce food fatigue during longer situations. canned chicken has one very practical advantage. It creates far less disagreement in the family than many other foods. Not everyone likes sardines, clams, or beets, but chicken is usually easier for people to accept. During a crisis, a food the whole family is willing to eat is sometimes more valuable than a highly nutritious food that only one person will touch. You should not buy a brand you have never tried before. Quality can vary significantly between brands. Some are soft, some are dry, and some are saltier than you expect. Test them first before stockpiling large amounts. Another point to pay attention to is sodium. Many canned chicken products contain a fairly high amount of salt, so people managing blood pressure should read labels carefully and choose lower sodium options if possible. Another thing to remember is not to buy only protein. Buy the foods that help protein reach its full value. Rice, noodles, broth, seasoning, cooking oil, and canned vegetables all play important roles. A can of chicken is not just protein. It is a way to turn simple base ingredients into a real meal when the refrigerator is no longer something you can rely on. Canned chicken is not the most glamorous item in the supermarket, but when you need a food that is flexible, easy to use, and easy for the whole family to accept, it is often one of the most dependable choices. And if chicken is the most flexible protein, the next item is what many people turn to when they no longer have enough energy to cook: canned chicken noodle soup. 3. Canned chicken noodle soup. At some point in a crisis, the issue is no longer whether you have enough food. The issue is whether you still have enough energy to cook. On the first day without power, everyone still has motivation. But by the third or fourth day, when you have not slept well, the weather feels more uncomfortable, the refrigerator has nearly been cleared out, and the whole family starts getting tired. A meal that is easy to open, easy to heat, and easy to eat becomes much more valuable. That is why canned chicken noodle soup appears on this list. Not because it is a perfect food, but because it is an easy food. A 10.5 ounce can usually cost from $1.50 to $3 at many American supermarkets. For that small amount of money, you already have broth, noodles, a little chicken, and a meal that requires almost no preparation. Open the can, heat it if possible. Eat it with crackers or add a little rice, and you have something that helps the body feel more comfortable. Chicken noodle soup is most valuable on the days when the body does not want to fight with a meal. When you are tired, cold, have a headache, or just need something soft and warm, a simple bowl of soup can be much easier to accept than dry rice, crackers, or dense canned meat. This is especially important for older adults. There are days when the body does not want to handle food that is too dry, too hard, or too heavy in the stomach. A hot bowl of soup does not force the body to work too hard when it is already tired. It does not just give you calories. It gives you the feeling of being cared for. And in a crisis, that feeling is not small. Many people think every can of soup is enough to be a meal. Many soups are fairly thin, low in protein, and not very high in energy. So if you want to store them, read the nutrition label. You can upgrade soup by adding canned chicken, canned vegetables, dry noodles, rice, potatoes, or a little pepper and garlic powder to make the meal more filling and less bland. You also need to pay attention to sodium, especially for people managing blood pressure. Chicken noodle soup is not the strongest item in the food pantry. But when the whole family is too tired to turn ingredients into a meal, it can be the thing that helps you sit down, eat a simple meal, and keep going for one more day. 2. Canned sardines. A can of sardines usually costs only about $1 to $3, but it can provide more than 20 grams of protein, omega-3s, vitamin D, and calcium from the soft, edible bones. This is why sardines appear on many food storage lists. Not the most appealing, but extremely effective. In a prolonged crisis, you do not just need food to feel full. You need food that helps the body keep functioning steadily. After many days of eating rice, noodles, crackers, or repetitive canned foods, a can of sardines can add protein, good fat, and help the meal keep you full longer. Sardines are different from many other protein foods because one small can is already enough to create a clear, nutritional serving. You do not need to cook, combine many ingredients, or divide a large can across several meals. When you need a quick, compact, nutrient-dense serving, sardines do that very well. They are also fairly flexible to use. You can eat them directly, eat them with crackers, mix them with rice, add them to noodles, eat them with potatoes, or mash them with mayonnaise and seasoning to make a simple sandwich. The type packed in oil helps make the meal less dry, while the tomato sauce type is often easier for beginners to eat. The biggest mistake is buying too many before trying them. Sardines have their own distinct flavor, and not everyone likes them right away. Try a few types before stockpiling large amounts. If you are managing blood pressure, you should also pay attention to the sodium content on the label. When choosing sardines, the most important detail is the soft bones. Many people who are new to eating them may find them unfamiliar, but those soft bones are exactly where sardines get their special calcium value. The type packed in oil is usually easier to eat with crackers or rice. The tomato sauce type is often easier for beginners to enjoy. In terms of nutrition, price, shelf life, and storage ability, sardines are one of the strongest items on the canned food shelf. And if sardines represent nutrient density, the item at the top of the list represents what most people need most when a crisis lasts longer. A complete meal. 1. Canned beef stew. Imagine the third day after a major storm. The power is still out. You have eaten almost all the fresh food in the refrigerator and start looking at your emergency food supply. At that point, the difference between ingredients and a meal begins to become very clear. A bag of rice is an ingredient. A pack of noodles is an ingredient. A can of beans is an ingredient. But canned beef stew is different. It is almost a complete meal. Meat, vegetables, broth, and starch are already combined in the same can. That is why this item ranks number 1 on the list. Not because it has the longest shelf life, not because it is the cheapest, but because it solves one of the biggest problems when a crisis lasts longer: exhaustion. After many stressful days, very few people want to stand in the kitchen for hours putting several ingredients together. They want something simple, fast, and enough to make them feel like they have just eaten a real dinner. Canned beef stew does that. Sometimes the greatest value of food is not in the calories or the number of years it can be stored. It is in reducing the effort and decisions you have to make when you are already exhausted. And beef stew has already done most of that work ahead of time. It is also very flexible. You can eat it directly from the can, eat it with bread, pour it over rice, mix it with mashed potatoes, or add it to noodles to create a larger meal. With just one can, you already have something much closer to a complete dinner than having to open several different foods. A common mistake many families make is storing only ingredients without storing any complete meals. On paper, that pantry may look very large, but when people are tired, short on time, or do not want to cook, they usually reach for the easiest options. That is when the real value of beef stew appears. Store it in a dry, cool place, and check the condition of the can regularly. If the can is swollen, leaking, or seriously damaged, discard it instead of taking the risk. Because in normal life, a can of beef stew may not look special at all. But when things are no longer normal, it can be the thing that helps the whole family sit down, eat a decent dinner, and feel like they still have some control over the situation. Preparing is not about living in fear. Preparing is about giving yourself more options before life suddenly changes. The interesting thing is that the most valuable foods are often not the most expensive ones. They are ordinary cans of food that many people walk past every day. Their real value only appears when stores close early, when power outages last for days, or when you simply no longer have enough energy to start from scratch. Hopefully, you will never have to depend completely on the foods on today's list. But if that day ever comes, you will be very glad you prepared while everything was still easy to buy. Now I want to ask you, out of these 9 items today, which one would be the first thing you would add to your food pantry?